There were two Super Bowls on yesterday. One, obviously, the football game, and the other, Dwayne Casey taking on the Toronto Raptors. I'm Noor Zainab next to Jelani, Goodridge-Reid, and Justin Pooni.
Huh?
It's true. That was Dwayne Casey's Super Bowl. No, whenever he plays
yeah,
the
that is
Raptors,
true,
that's a huge game for
Whenever
him.
he plays
Justin,
the Raptors.
That's
you
the biggest
roll your eyes
hyperbole
one more
you've
time.
ever spoken ever.
Are you kidding me? That just shows you have no idea what the Raptors are, what their history is like, who their
No,
nemesis
I understand.
are.
No, I understand that
No,
completely.
you don't get it. You have no idea. But you know what? Ignore Justin, because today's rundown, we're going to have a look at Jakob Poeltl's addition to the Raptors and how the Raptors have played so far with him in the lineup. And some people are thinking about letting Nick Nurse go and how we feel about those people and what we have to say. But first, you guys, the Raptors have played about 2 games with Poeltl in the lineup since he's been in Toronto. They've won one by 1 point. That was yesterday against Dwayne Casey. And they lost against the Utah Jazz without Jordan Clarkson in the lineup.
Yikes.
What does Poeltl's addition say so far about this team?
The issues are still there, especially late game. You look at this team late game offensively, they can't get a bucket. And it is very concerning because if they really want to make a push for the playoffs or the play-in and that pipe dream is still alive, you're going to have to win these close games. And yes, they beat Detroit by 1 point after blowing another
But
fourth.
it's Detroit.
Any other team in the NBA would have won that game, right? It's very concerning. It is very concerning because if you cannot close out these games and you cannot get stopped late, you have no chance of being successful in the NBA. And especially now, Super Bowl's done, the All-Star break, once the All-Star break is over, then you start seeing that playoff race really heat up in the NBA. And if the Raptors want to stay alive, they can't be doing this. They need to clean this up because it's going to bite them in the ass more times than not.
So far, we've seen more offensive sets, by Nick Nurse through Jakob Poeltl, which is pretty good. That provides more creativity or more opportunities for creativity on the offense. But we also see on the defensive side what I talked about when we did bring him in. I felt like he was going to have an impact because the center position was a struggle on the defensive side of the ball as well. And we see that the shooting percentage and the efficiency of other teams has actually gone down when he's on the court. So that's a good thing. I think that's why the Raptors wanted to bring him in the door because we know what he's capable of doing. And so far, let's face it, the stats aren't there yet, but the impact is there. So don't look at the stat lines so far. I'd say look at what he's done in terms of
Or the wins and losses.
I
I
think people also expect that with Jakob Poeltl that he wasn't going to be a stat sheet
Yeah,
monster.
no.
He was going to provide a defensive impact, and have those off the stat sheet type of
And
impact.
I also think those late game situations, it's not because of Jakob Poeltl. I feel like every single game the Raptors have played so far this season has come down to the
it's been
last
close.
minute, and it's always just been dragged out. That's also why their net rating is so close, and it makes them look good because they are, they go on those big tantrums throughout the whole game, but towards the very end, they're 5 points in, but Nick Nurse is calling a challenge here, they're calling fouls here, right in there. So that could be a factor too. But I also wonder, because they've had so many close games like that, where they seem like they're winning throughout the whole majority of the game, and towards the very last 2 minutes, they can't close it out.
Well, you can't
is that
afford
quiet
that.
tanking?
Quiet tanking. I don't know. I don't know, but you can't afford to do that though.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Because you want at some point to have comfortable wins, right? You can't be struggling to get a win. Justin talked about the fourth quarter. Offense is absent in the final stretch, right? Detroit shouldn't have been able to get back in the game like that. Right?
That game should have been a cruise control game for them. And then where their starters could rest the second half of the fourth quarter.
You're up
let the
double
bench
digits.
guys
Even
exactly.
without OG and Gary Trent, that should
You have to close
those
out games like that.
So you're up double digits with 9 left to play, right? As we move closer to the end of the game, you're allowing them to get good looks, right? We saw Jaden Ivey hit some key
big
shots,
3-pointers,
right? We had Diallo made his presence felt, and also Alec Burks off the bench, 21 points. He hit some shots from the outside. That can't happen, right? So that's also looking at the defense. The defense, even though Jakob's here, allowing us to have an anchor inside, a guy that can provide impact in the paint. Again, we're going to talk about him really soon. Nick Nurse, the adjustments, are they there, right? They have to be there because we can't afford, especially if you're playing for a play-in spot or a playoff spot, we'll see, you can't allow yourselves to be in these close matchups.
Absolutely, I'm glad you mentioned Nick Nurse because the game against the Utah Jazz the night before they played the Pistons, one of the reasons why people are calling for a coaching change right now is because of that last 5 minutes. I think we all know what we're talking about, right? You had Scotty Barnes there, and I think Scotty Barnes actually is one of the lead league leading in clutch minutes.
Yeah.
And we've seen that throughout the whole first half. He's pretty much cruising, but the fourth quarter is Scotty Barnes' quarter. However, for that game, we saw Nick, first of all, take Scotty off and bring on Fred VanVleet.
Right.
And then we also saw him run the offense through both Fred VanVleet and Gary Trent, while Pascal Siakam is right there on the court. So are people, do they have somewhat of credibility saying that in Nick Nurse's decision making right now?
Sometimes the grass isn't always green on the other side. And I think Nick Nurse, he's a champion coach of the year, right? I think Nick Nurse sometimes feels that this roster isn't what he wants in a team, right? I think that's why you're seeing kind of that struggle offensively at the end of the games, and stuff like that. Because he's mentioned public comments about players, and he's publicly, ripped into guys. Sometimes I get the sense that Nick Nurse feels kind of handcuffed with this roster. And I think with the guys he has, right? And that's why you're always seeing constant changes and stuff like that. Look, the Raptors have very good individual pieces. They're not meshing this year. That's their biggest problem. It's something that I think this All-Star break, Nick Nurse really has to sit down and reflect and understand, okay, this is what I have for the rest of the season. This is how I got to get. I think, to be honest, that's the biggest thing the Raptors need for this All-Star break. Nick Nurse really needs to sit down and really understand, okay, these are the teams I'm playing next. These are the guys I have for the rest of the season. The trade deadline's passed. How do I make this work? Because when you, even last night against Detroit, Friday against Utah, you don't see any continuity, anything, right? They make mistakes. Their offense looks stagnant. Their defense, gives up big three-pointers, right? How do they nip that in the butt? That's a Nick Nurse. But people should not be calling for his head. This guy's one of the best coaches in the league. Right. And if you leave, you want him gone, who are you going to bring in?
That's the question.
Who are you going to bring in? Right? So I think Nick Nurse is as safe as ever.
He is safe because his relationship with Masai, with Bobby, they trust him, right? He's won a championship. You know how hard it is to win a championship?
Yeah,
okay, it's tough. So you give him the benefit of the doubt there. You're also talking about the coach of the year 2020, 53-19, the bubble. Okay, that bubble year. You need to chill on the firing Nick Nurse thing, right? It's been a tough year, of course. Yeah. Remember the injuries when the season started, that put us in a hole early. And then yes, if you want to go after him, you can talk about how the adjustments on the defensive side of the ball at times are really, bad, right? Let's just be fair. He hasn't been coaching that well this year. Yeah. Right? We understand the schemes, the personnel, it hasn't really meshed for him on defense.
The lineups have looked kind of shaky
the lineups for sure, and what he's been thinking. A lot of times, we let guys get open looks, right? Because he provides he wants a lot of attention in the inside, but then that leaves guys on the outside, and then vice versa, right? So we see that issue. And then offensively, he's still trying to figure out what to do with this team, right? Yeah. Justin pointed out, does he believe in the personnel that he has right now on the offensive side of the ball? How does he make that work, right? So we've seen an issue there, but I still think you're looking across the league. There are so many teams that have guys in and out of the door. They have carousels year after year after year with head coaches, and they can't find that guy. And that's why would you give up? Okay, it's a down year, right? It's a down year.
It happens. It's sports, right?
Yeah, we even had a down year in Tampa. What happened the year after? Playoffs. You do not give up on Nick Nurse at this point, because every time someone wants to trade, right? Who are you going to get back?
Exactly.
You want to fire him? Who are you going to get back? He's one of the most successful coaches over the last 5 years. Yeah. You're not going to get rid of him.
And I think that's the big one. If a free agent or any superstar, whatever, consider Toronto, that's one of the biggest factors the Raptors have over any other franchise in the NBA. They have a stable front office, and they have a great coach that have a great relationship together, which is so important in the NBA.
Right.
Look at the Lakers, prime example. Coach, front office do not get along, right? You need to have that continuity from your organization from top to bottom, and I think the Raptors have that, and that's a massive strong suit.
He's also been embedded in the locker room for a very long time, even while Dwayne Casey was here, because he was the assistant coach, so he understands the people that are running everything, the players. I will say the one thing I will say about him is when you're having a team like this, it's not up to what you've been given, it's up to what you do with it. So that to me is a factor, though, where I'm like, Absolutely. He's supposed to be given a lot of lackluster where he's come from, how much he's given us. But at the same time, for me, it's more so I feel like we don't have a voice in the locker room. And that's what we're missing in terms of a leader in the players. Perhaps even Nick Nurse. Like I'm thinking, has he lost the locker room?
I think
somewhat?
it's also because all those rumors that happened.
Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know, that whole stretch where we
Yeah.
were not winning games at all. I think that really
It's
hurt
been a really noisy.
morale.
It's been a really noisy season for the
Right.
Raptors, right? So perhaps now that we mentioned last week after the trade deadline, things kind of quiet down
Yeah.
and they play better because they're gonna need it. And I think the All-Star break could not come
Yeah,
at a
and
perfect
Nick has
time
gone
for-
through things
Yeah.
too. Hopefully he's
Yeah,
doing
Yeah,
well
he's gonna be
already.
out for a
But
little
yeah,
bit. He wasn't
I
there yesterday.
I still believe in him. Obviously, I haven't always been impressed throughout the
Mm-hmm.
season with what I've seen from him, but I still believe that he's one of the
one
better
of the-
coaches
Yeah.
in the league.
one of the best coaches
It's
in
been
the
a
league.
tough year, but we'll see what happens.
Well, we know Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster are banking on this team. They believe in them and they're betting on them. So they got to get this together or they're going to see a lot of shipping happening in the summer. And we'll see if the Raptors can hopefully get some wins together and if they're going to make the play-in or the playoffs.
Yeah,
Or
let's
we just
go.
Hang the
call
banner,
it
the
a
play-in
season
banner.
super early this year while we don't even get any summer in Toronto. But catch us next time when we take on the Raptors and their next opponent. I'm Noor Zainab, Jelani Goodridge-Reid, Justin Pooni. See you next time.